Let's go live now. With me in the studio is the independent Senator David Pocock. The vote in the Senate happening in the next hour or two. The government has got the numbers. Why is this the right intervention in your view?
Thank you, Aaron. Good to be with you. I mean, I don't agree with all elements of this bill, but clearly Australians are doing it tough when it comes to cost of living. We've seen rents, mortgages go up, and energy prices too. This is a way to cap gas prices at still, frankly, a very profitable level. We're in a situation where coal and gas companies are making record profits and selling our resources back to us at these record prices, through no hard work of their own. This is due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and so I think there's a really, strong argument for something like a windfall profits tax. The government's not doing that, so I'm supporting support for households and small businesses that need it at a time where, even with these supports, we're going to see energy prices go up, say 47% over the next 2 years. So great short-term fix. I want the government to do more in terms of real cost of living relief when it comes to helping with electrification, which we know unlocks not $230 relief, but thousands of dollars a year per household.
Does the government need to be cautious, though, in terms of the supply? The industry is saying there's a risk to supply and investment. Does the government need to watch that carefully, in your view?
We export, 75% of our gas? I don't buy the supply argument. We saw this sort of fear-mongering from the gas industry in WA around the domestic reservation policy. And the WA government stared them down. They invested. Clearly, gas companies can make profit. And so, I think we have to stand up to gas companies who are making record profits off our Australian gas and then selling it back to us at those international prices, and then crying foul when we say, listen, there's a whole bunch of manufacturers, small businesses and households doing it really tough. We're going to have to put a cap on this.
The industry is talking about a $20 million advertising campaign. Are you concerned that money would be able to shift enough support within the electorate that might put pressure on the government to relent?
My concern is how out of touch these gas companies are with everyday Australians who are genuinely doing it tough. We've gone through the bushfires into 2 years of a global pandemic, all the challenges of that, plus this cost of living crisis that we see across the country. These are our resources, and as it is, we don't benefit as much as other countries, say Norway or Qatar, where they're getting a big proportion of the value of those resources back to invest in the future and to be able to, in this instance, be able to compensate households. That doesn't happen here. And so, this is a short-term measure, I support it, but ultimately the long-term solution is to get off gas, help households transition to electrifying households, and we know that there are big savings to be unlocked when we do that.
The Prime Minister spoke about the reservation you touched on earlier, that WA domestic gas reservation that Alan Carpenter put in place close to 2 decades ago now. Mm-hmm. He argues it's too hard to do it retrospectively, but any future projects, say like Narrabri in New South Wales, should have a percentage for domestic use. What's your read on the notion of a domestic gas reservation?
Well, this is something that both major parties have, I think you could say, failed everyday Australians on energy policy, where we don't recoup much value from them. And yes, we'll hear a lot of talk about jobs and sort of taxes paid, but the reality is when you look at the proportion of the extraordinary profits that they're making, we're recouping very little of that value. So I would back ways for Australians to get more from our resources. When it comes to new projects, scientists are clear, we can't have new fossil fuel projects when it comes to climate change and the climate impacts that we're seeing. And that's inconvenient for the Australian resource industry that is investing in new fossil fuel projects. But it's the right thing to do for all of us. And we've got to start looking at the opportunity that presents us with, the transition to build an economy for the future, to invest in those regions that have had a reliance on fossil fuels for jobs, but then also at a household level, how do we unlock savings through electrification? You know, the price of sun and wind aren't going up. We can lock in energy prices into the future.
I spoke to the Prime Minister about the Voice, the referendum, as we wrap up this year and look to next year, and put to him this concern from Father Frank Brennan, a respected Jesuit priest and lawyer, and he said, can we design a voice which doesn't mean you're going off to the High Court every second day, among other concerns? He's obviously expressing the concern of some commentators and observers that this could be susceptible to legal challenge, the Voice. Do you think the Prime Minister would benefit and the Voice would benefit the referendum if he was able to put more detail out there to reassure undecided voters on this?
You know, the Voice is about the principle. Do Australians believe that Australia's First Nations people in Australia, should have a voice to Parliament on issues that affect them? And do we trust the Parliament to then come up with what that looks like? I think, yes, there is a case for more detail, but let's not get lost in the detail here. This is, the referendum is really about the principle of it. And, based on the stories I hear in here and the things I've seen on committees, we have to ensure that First Nations people have that voice. And I certainly support that. When it comes to legal challenges and lawfare, this is something you hear a lot about in the Senate, often to try and stop moving forward on these sorts of agendas of making things more inclusive. But this is happening at the moment. The Narrabri gas project in the Pilliga is being challenged by Gomeroi people at the moment, and yet both sides of politics are all for it. They want to fast track it, whereas First Nations people are saying, hang on, this is our land. We have native title over this. You can't just override it. So that's happening already, and I think it points to the lack of consultation and the lack of voice that First Nations people have on all sorts of issues.
Senator Pocock, I appreciate your time today and right throughout the year. All the best for the break.
Thanks, Kieran. Cheers.